Well, I'm sure our participants are wondering what were some of the answers and strategies that were shared in the 4 working groups we did. Becca, did you have some strategies to some of the problems you mentioned?
So I don't know how concrete of a strategy this is, but one phrase that kept coming up with this was this idea of giving managers and giving employees freedom within a framework. So this idea that we want to, as an organization, we want to kind of have a general central plan of how we're going to approach work moving forward, whether it's going to be offer that remote option, offer the hybrid option, but recognizing that we have a need for local variability and to kind of account for that. And so really preparing our leaders to have those conversations with their teams to figure out what's going to work in our environment, while maintaining some consistency with the organization's overarching strategy. So that's one thing that I heard a lot, and I heard it is the conversation started out at the leadership level, but then as I had more conversations, we started talking more and more about what this work environment looked like for employees. It became clear that this actually trickles down to employees as well. So to the extent that we've got employees working remotely or hybrid, we're going to have to give them a little bit more freedom as well, kind of have them working in freedom within a framework. So that was sort of a consistent trend in the conversations that seemed like it's going to trickle kind of throughout every level of the organization.
Yeah. Chris, what would you add?
Training, particularly focused on leaders. So I think a lot of leaders came around to the idea that remote's feasible. I think they're still not good at managing in remote. So it just takes a different kind of effort when you're not seeing people every day. So how do, as a leader, do you stay connected to your employees? How do you balance now this hybrid where some employees are in with you and others are working remotely? How do you keep those conversations going? How do you make sure you're giving good feedback? How do you actually think about yourself as a leader, I think, is a big one. So again, when everyone was in the office, I think a lot of leaders thought leadership was, being over their shoulders and looking versus being coaches versus being facilitators. And so how do you create leaders that are those coaches and facilitators versus observers of people's actions? So I think that's a big one. I think it also is training for HR business partners to help them have these conversations with the leaders they support. So when there is this freedom and around flexibility, that it doesn't morph to just the leader's preferences versus what really is the work being done and what the team needs to accomplish. Because I do think some leaders still are just going to go back to the, old school, everyone's got to be here because I'm here. And I think having the HR business partners who are skilled at having those conversations and coaching those leaders to actually think through what's the work, what are the challenges, who needs to be here, how do we create a level playing field? I think that is going to take training and development too.
Yeah, that's a good one. And that's where that foundational work that HR business partners have been doing so long and building that trust and relationship with their leaders is so important to get those leaders to listen to, hey, this, we may get attrition if you're not going to open up your viewpoints on some of these, even though that's your preference. So I think that's really important. Brad, what else did you find for strategies?
I think both Becca and Chris highlight some important ones, training and also the kind of flexibility, really kind of localizing, a lot of this. I saw a question come in from Jackie, so I'll maybe steer a couple of my points to, questions she asked. One is, what does hybrid work? What's it going to look like in different organizations? So I think, yes, we're looking at allowing some flexibility, but I'm also seeing companies try to, I think, simplify the options that are available so we don't end up with a million permutations, right? So generally it's like, okay, we have home, hybrid, and hub, which is office. Seeing some companies say, oh, hybrid's going to be really 2 main options. Maybe an employee is at home 1 or 2 days a week, or in the office, 1 or 2 days a week. But those are going to be kind of the different options that are available. And then you add some flexibility around that, but it simplifies, the framework that you're allowing the freedom within, I guess. The second one, and this, Jackie says, how's it going to be implemented? Pilot, phase working all at once. What I'm seeing companies is really adopt more of a phased approach, right? So one of the things that I thought was really clever in the working group I ran, these couple companies said they have a invite, encourage, expect framework, right? Early on, employees are invited to come back to the office, just starting to get comfortable. After that, they're encouraged to start coming in more regularly. And ultimately, there comes a time, whenever that may be, later this year, early next year, where employees are expected to be back in the office, on a regular schedule. And I think that allows, employees time to adapt to this. It eases that transition. And the third piece I would add on top of that is really putting into place opportunities to listen to employees as well as to look at data, right? And track this over time. As you're working through these phases, having channels so employees can, safely voice concerns that they may be having. My manager's not giving me the prime assignments that my colleagues in the office are getting, for example, as well as really having analytics to look at how is this working? How is it impacting attrition, productivity, engagement, et cetera, and using that to revise our strategies over time, right? Not having a kind of static, approach. So I think feedback and analytics will really be critical for adapting this.
I think one of the other ones I heard pretty consistently was this idea of having particular days where meetings happen in the office, so that there's set days where the team knows they're all going to be there together, and then to really pack those days with things that have to be done or are done better when everyone's together, and so that people aren't just coming in the office to do individual work all day. That would make no sense. So how do you make sure you schedule certain days that become the de facto team days, and so that there's agreement among the team that which days those might be best? And that's where some joint flexibility, I think, becomes important. And that's where the listening part that Brad's talking to, and how as a leader am I talking to the folks on my team to figure out what those days are and what that work is, where we really need to be together as a group to get this stuff done. And I think that also gets to some of the points around visibility, that if we have those days when we're all together, I think that does start to level out the playing field a little bit for those people who do have the preference to continue to do more remote work, that they still have those days when they're going to get to see their boss, maybe their skip level boss, maybe other people that they need to build relationships with on that team. I think that becomes important to have some structure, and not just, as Brad said, you just can't have a million different plans running around, because then people don't line up when they need to be lined up together.
So adding to that point, in addition to kind of identifying, what are the days that we're all going to be there so that we can accomplish X, Y, Z, another thing I heard was being really intentional about the time that we are together, right? So maybe we're choosing those days because we have to accomplish a few things, but then being really intentional but with how we're spending our collective time on those days. Also being really intentional about what are the things that we can accomplish remotely. If we're going to have limited time together, what are the things that we don't need to worry about doing in person, so that we can really make the most of the time that everybody is in the office?
Good. Yeah.